Hello and welcome to Climate Dialogues. This is a podcast that will be discussing how to save Africa from climate shocks. It is a discussion that will be centered around the findings and the commitments made during the Africa Climate Summit and what the players are doing to meet those commitments. As you remember, the Africa Climate Summit was held here last year, organized by the African Union and the government of Kenya, seeking to find solutions to the climate crisis facing Africa. And the theme, as you might recall, was driving green growth and climate finance solutions for Africa and the world. And today we shall be discussing the role of the manufacturing sector in saving Africa's planet or saving the climate crisis, especially in this continent. And who better to have this conversation with than the CEO of the Kenya Association of Manufacturers, Anthony Mwangi? Thank you for making time.
You're most welcome.
Now, let's just begin from the global introduction of it. What do you think is the role of the private sector in tackling the climate crisis?
First, the world is in a very interesting space from the climate change perspective. As you're aware, if you go back almost to 100 years or more, the climate change has been occasioned by rising temperatures, which have rose by almost 1.5 degrees. And sometimes when you talk about 1.5 degrees centigrade, people think it's a small, delta. But you just need to compare with your body temperature. If your body temperature goes up by 1 degree centigrade, you have a fever. So the world actually has fever, and it's becoming hot and unbearable. If you look at it from Kenya, point of view, and you look at just the effects of the drought enhanced rain that we have received, we've just come from 4 years of extreme drought to extreme rain, to flood. Many of our people have lost their lives. The rivers, even today as you're speaking, the water levels are rising in some lakes, whether it's Nakuru, Naivasha, Bogoria. Schools have been submerged. Even homes in Nairobi, some of the areas that we have never seen, the Runda and other places. So the real climate change is real, and we can actually see it in action. And a lot of this has been occasioned by our own human activities to support our livelihoods. Because manufacturing is to support our livelihoods. Our lives revolves around manufacturing in more ways than we think about. The first thing that you interact with when you wake up in the morning is a manufactured good. Yes. Soap, toothpaste, lotion. All these are manufactured goods, and the whole life as you progress is purely manufactured goods. So our human activities have led to the world, in terms of the means of production that you're using now, world to be unsustainable. Our consumption levels, our means of production. And therefore, that's why it is important that all of us, whether we are producing more to the environment or less, it's not a challenge that knows boundaries. It doesn't know boundaries. Africa contributes about 2 to 4%, but we're bearing the biggest brunt. And therefore, what the government of Kenya did to bring the Africa Climate Summit, and also, in cooperation with government of Kenya and AU, was just to buttress the importance of why us as Africans, as Kenyans, we need to be very interested in this subject.
Now, let's break down some of the outcomes from the ACS. And I remember that one of the outcomes was that the private sector was challenged to be more involved in green growth and also climate finance. How did you as manufacturers interpret that to mean?
Is that manufacturers have a direct role in mitigating the effects of climate change. Luckily for CAM, we have been running this together with the government of Kenya, are still so, and we can say that's a leadership, climate or energy leadership by CAM Secretariat and also by the government of Kenya. Recently, we celebrated Energy Management Awards, the 20th anniversary, and we recognize that the roadmap to green transition, the first thing that you first deal with is to do more with less. If it is energy, can you produce by consuming less? And energy efficiency then becomes the first step for your green transition. For the last 20 years, CAM has been championing energy efficiency. And so far, when we do our calculations, we have saved about 2,000 gigawatts of power. That means that we actually have saved the country from putting up 100 megawatt thermal plant, coal plant, nuclear plant, just by using or doing more with less. We have put very aggressive ways of, again, propelling that and augment that with the investment in green energy. We're replacing, transitioning our production facilities with solar PVs, with other technologies, with wind and others. So CAM, and during the ACS, we came together with like-minded companies and associations like KEPSA and Equity Bank. And as CAM, we took up the role of championing green manufacturing. And luckily, we're in a very, very, very vantage point as Kenya, because we're producing almost 92% of our power from renewable sources. We sit on Rift Valley that has enormous resources, geothermal resources. And this can actually make Kenya to be the global leader in geothermal and green manufacturing. We've seen the government putting up parks in Naivasha and other places, whether we can be able to put in green industries, green steel, green cement, green hydrogen. We just need to push that. And we are plugged into this conversation to drive the agenda, to drive the government, to drive the industry, to start moving into those spaces so that we reduce our carbon footprint.
And that's great, because you're speaking about championing it. But I just wonder then, are there ways also that CAM is supporting your members towards this green transition, especially maybe the smaller to medium enterprises? You've spoken about energy consumption. Now I'm looking at the broader concept of waste management and also sustainable sourcing. So that is all wholesome process, the supply chain from sourcing all the way to production.
If we can just, even before we go to supply chain management and other efforts that we've put, the circular economy, one of the things that we've done, just remaining on energy, is coming up with models of how we can finance transition to renewable sources of energy. As you're aware, solar PVs and wind and others are slightly a bit expensive. But we've come up with models in partnership with some of our partners, who provide these services, so that then you can invest and pay on OPEX, on operation cost, instead of CAPEX. And all those have been created here with our members and with our partners, meaning that if you're an SME or MSME, you can be able to invest to use solar and transition your diesel generator or your, the grid power more to solar or more to other sources of energy. And then you pay that as it pays itself. So you lower the barrier for entry. So that is energy, and we've been doing that. So energy efficiency, energy financing, technologies, new technologies on finance transition. So all that we are doing through the Center for Energy Efficiency and Conservation, CEC. All right? However, we have now expanded that space to go to green energy, green transition, climate change, and circular economy. If you look at all that in totality, we're actually building a center for excellence for climate change, and resilience, so that then we can be able to, if it is supply chain, We're organizing the supply chain so that we can make sure that we reduce even the waste. If you look at food, for instance, and I just give you an example, a few value chains that we're looking at. Look at tomatoes. From farm to the factory, or farm to fork, the wastage is about 60%. How can we, and you know you're producing, so if you're producing 100%, but you're losing our 60%, you remember you're using herbicides, you're using pesticides, you're using water, to grow all this, and then you lose 60%. That again has its own way of making our climate acceleration worse.
Yeah.
So we're looking at organizing those value chains. If you look at maize, and that's our staple food. I mean, we can't run away from maize. I think something is ingrained in us. We have to eat ugali. But if you look at again, how much do we lose in terms of what we produce and what we finally consume and want to make to good use? We lose almost 40%. So value chain by value chain, we have mapped out about 32 value chains to make sure that we're reducing the waste. A lot of it is because the manufacturer is on one side, on one side, the farmer is on the other side. They don't know each other. There's a lot of information asymmetry between the two. So we're trying to bridge that gap so that then we can be able to know a farmer only produce what they can be able to consume and what they can be able to sell. Before they lose through the post-harvest loss, we know how to preserve. So that is what we're doing from the food perspective, so that we stop producing more, and then as we waste what we're wasting, we start importing. Now you can imagine the impact of shipping and importing from far places, what it does to the environment. So if we can be able to save what we have here, it means that we're going also to save the environment, because transportation is a big contributor of emissions.
And towards all these also, as you said, transitioning to green energy is expensive, and you've spoken about the finance aspect of it. SES spoke about the need for innovative climate financing to fund climate projects. And I wonder whether, as CAM, you have thought about how can the globe come together and what sort of innovative financing can be put in place that manufacturers can take advantage of and leverage upon, so that they can make the transition a bit more smoother and less expensive.
One of it, and we are exploring that through the Center for Climate Change and Green Growth, is carbon credit. We've come up with Kenya, and I mean as CAM members, and we've planned to plant 10 million trees. As we plant 10 million trees, we are looking for opportunities for us to trade carbon, not necessarily to make money, but to be able to transition our production facilities to be much more greener. All right? This is a subject that we've taken up, and we're developing our capabilities. We know that also the country is developing the capabilities. We want to be able to guide also the country to begin the arrowhead for the country to develop the carbon markets. While we know that is itself is not panacea, because there are people who want to trade in carbon so that they can continue polluting. We think that yes, it could give us opportunities for energy transition ourselves, but we need to look at, as we do that, the other people who are purchasing carbon credit are also minimizing their impact and their product, they're greening their manufacturing facilities. So that is one of the areas that we're looking at, that into the future, it will help us to transition to better sources of energy. And especially energy is the main issue.
Yeah, and I'm glad you mentioned it yourself, because carbon credits and tree planting is a very touchy subject, especially when it comes to just transition and essentially and the fact that it can also be taken advantage of. This school of thought that says carbon credits or carbon trading, as you've mentioned, sometimes it gives people an excuse to pollute. Tree planting, sometimes for them, people also, they feel like while it's a noble exercise, it really should be about protecting existing ecosystems. Now you have entered this realm, and I just wonder how will then CAM protect itself so that whatever you do is actually an additive towards saving the environment, as opposed to being part of the problem of the emerging greenwashing from this sort of procedures like carbon trading and tree planting?
I think it's the sum of all parts or part of the puzzle, and in change management, when you start, a new thing, you'll have different approaches. Some of them perhaps are more useful than the others. Tree planting, we've seen, yes, it's and especially if you dovetail that, you're doing that so that other people can come and buy the carbon credit, they continue. But I look at it as a transition. So we start from where we are, but as the train goes down the road, start gaining momentum, and you start putting more people and start improving the consciousness of everybody. So it's going to take a bit of time. It's going to take time. But I think the first thing is first we start rolling down in the right direction and then start putting people on the bus, on the train. And I think this is part of change management. There will be early adopters. There will be people who will be late, adopters. But again, all these efforts is to make sure that there is something positive that is happening.
Yeah. And as we move forward toward this, to make all this adoption moving on very well, I wonder, are the policies in place good enough for you as manufacturers to make the transition to sustainability? Are you happy with the current policies, not just in Kenya, but in the continent as a whole? Because I believe you interact with also other manufacturers from across the continent. Give us a status report and what needs to be done to, in terms policy-wise, to enable manufacturers transition quicker to cleaner energy, cleaner production, sustainable development.
We've seen, and thanks for that question, we've seen a very proactive government, and especially government of Kenya, and setting up and convening such a global event was a signature to their commitment to mitigating climate change. And from the policy perspective, we have done a lot of work with them, and collaborative work for that matter. Would remember when there was a ban on single-use plastic papers, and we came together with government, came up with the National Conservation Act that created a pathway for what we call EPR, Extended Producer Responsibility. Extended producer responsibility means that if I am a producer of PET that is used to package, sodas or juices or other products, then I contribute to ensure that I follow that product to the end of its life, right? And therefore, as CAM, we were the first one to engage government, and we went all over the world looking for best examples. We set up this, producer responsibility organization. Right now, where we are seated, we are housing one of them. One of the biggest is called KEPRO. And through that, we've been able to onboard almost 750 producers or manufacturers. That is way over 50% of our members. We've been able to mop up over 50,000 metric tons of waste that is being now recycled. We have established a downstream business of recycling, which is actually growing. So from that perspective, we can say that the government of Kenya has been very proactive and very supportive. We have now gone further and start upskilling our neighboring countries, similar associations like Uganda and Tanzania. Ghanaians have come here. We're looking at different countries. So first is changing, and they say if you want to change the world, start by changing yourself. So we are changing ourselves step by step, and then we'll influence the change in our neighbors, and perhaps further up to West Africa and Southern African countries.
Yeah. And now let's shift to now green growth. There is a belief that there's lots of opportunities, especially in terms of creating green jobs and green opportunities. As manufacturers in Kenya, where do you think those opportunities lie, and what sort of environment are you creating for more green jobs as we go forward towards thinking green?
So first, I've just mentioned about the growing industry in reusable or recycling, a space, which I believe those are green jobs that are being created because you're helping to clean up the environment. But also, as Kenya, we have an opportunity. With the kind of the resources that we have at especially geothermal, we can actually be the epicenter for the green growth, not only for Kenya or for Africa, but for the entire globe. If you look at what is happening in Olkaria and the parks that the government of Kenya has put, the Kenyan has put, and Menengai and Baringo, enormous resources. So it is us to attract, and we are speaking about this, we are championing this, to start attracting technologies that can give us what now they call it green hydrogen. And once you get into green hydrogen, you can be able now to veer off to many other sectors. Green fertilizer, green steel, green cement, because you can use ammonia. And the good thing is that if you do it well and the technologies are still evolving, you can be able to transport that ammonia as a source of energy across the world. So if internet changed the world, green hydrogen could actually triple the economy of this world. Be able to have, aviation that is green, using green, hydrogen, green ammonia. You'll be able to have shipping that is green, using green ammonia. You're going to do steel in whether it is in India or in China, using green ammonia that we have produced in Kenya. We just now need to put, because you have the resources on the ground. You can see what oil did to the countries in Middle East. Yeah. Now, green hydrogen, is that what happened there can happen in this country.
How about global competitiveness? Across the globe now, you will see there's a huge demand. Products in the EU now, in the Europe, you see they say sustainably sourced. Great demand for people to see sustainably sourced, sustainably manufactured, and even the distribution in a way that is environment friendly. Do you think Kenya is positioned right now to take on the globe in the sustainability competition, or do you feel there are gaps still to be able to compete?
Kenya is at a very vantage point because we have all the ingredients, right? We are on the equator. We have no seasons, so we don't need to use a lot of HVAC, cooling down the buildings or warming up the buildings. We don't have to do a lot of greenhousing, for some of these products that are exported to Europe. So we are at the vantage point, but more is required for us to use that comparative advantage. Look at where we sit in the globe. You can fly your products to Europe, and that happens already. We fly, if you're flying to London today in the evening, you fly with the veggies that you're going to eat tomorrow in London, right? So we just need to put our act together and scale. There are people who are doing that, but we need now this to create a community of practice so that then we can scale our organic production, our green products. Now we have just opened up the market with the EU, 27 countries, $16 trillion a market. This is our real opportunity for us to put our act together. Because as you've said, if truly we are going to get access to that market in EU, we have to differentiate our products. Right now, we are a bit not competitive from that perspective, and a lot of it is because from scaling part of it. But with the right knowledge, with the right, nudge, we can be able to get there pretty fast.
From your perspective, what are the biggest challenges or barriers or impediments towards a fully green manufacturing sector in Kenya?
As you said and you mentioned before, the full transition of to green manufacturing is a journey, and it comes with its costs. We lack the necessary policy environment for you to be able to invest, from incentive point of view. If you're to make a choice, managing your P&L and being able to put, enough resources to greening your operations, perhaps you want first to manage your P&L, but with the right incentives, with the right investment, because we have the resources. Yeah. We are sitting on a sea of geothermal resource. So we just need to be able to bring it into play, to bring it on grid. right? Set up right infrastructure for investments in Naivasha. We're still talking about Naivasha 10 years later. If we had put our money where our mouth is, you would see movement of these organizations to that, because you can give people 5 cents of a dollar to be able to because our power is very expensive. Even for nothing else, people would move to set up in the geothermal wellheads because it is cheaper to do that.
Yeah.
So I think it's just, we need to work slightly harder. We need our ogware as a country need to work better. Private sector, public sector, international organizations, just focus on this, and we can be able to get there, perhaps, pretty fast than many other countries.
Yeah.
Yes.
And before we wind up, we saw what happened in Kenya with the floods, and hundreds of lives lost, thousands of land destroyed, and the climate shocks will continue because unfortunately the climate isn't waiting for us to go back. And how is CAM then preparing for this climate shock, building resilience among its members to make sure that these shocks do not destroy the manufacturing industry and by extension the country?
That's a big one, and as people say, perhaps we are doing this from an individual, point of view.
Yeah.
A lot of it driven by individual needs to reduce the costs. Individual needs to ensure that where you set up, you kind of scan the environment to know that tomorrow there's not a causeway for river, and especially now we are seeing all these things. But I think as a country, and this is something that we need to do as a strategy for the country, as opposed to a single association to do that. However, having said that, we are involved in the initiative, and we're providing our input from the policy perspective. Nairobi Rivers Commission, we are now members of that. We have also been appointed recently by His Excellency the President to join the National Disaster Management Council to be able to provide our expertise from where we sit from business point of view. And we're going to provide and collect all the wisdom from our members and be able to be helpful, be able to be useful to the government.
I think we stop there. Mwangi, thank you very much for making time to speak with us. That's been Climate Dialogues. It's the end of the first episode. Remember, we'll keep on having these conversations about exactly how to make sure that the outcomes of the Africa Climate Summit are observed and implemented by all the players. We'll be speaking to the public sector, the private sector, and also the non-governmental organizations. Remember, this is the only planet with chocolate. My name is Ferdinand Omundi. See you in the next one.